Welcome everyone to this month's SHRS Innovation Seminar. Our speaker today is Dr. Goeran Fiedler. So Dr. Fiedler is an engineer and credentialed prosthetist and orthotist with a background in clinical engineering, biomechanics, and health sciences. So Dr. Fiedler is also originally from Germany, so his degrees in education span multiple countries. So Dr. Fiedler currently serves as a tenured faculty member and associate professor in Pitt's Master of Science in Prosthetics and Orthotics program, housed within Pitt's Department of Rehabilitation Science and Technology. And during his time at Pitt, Goeran has won several Pitt Innovation Awards, as well as recognition for his outstanding mentorship both inside and outside of the classroom, which I can personally attest to. So today, Dr. Fiedler will be talking about his failed startup, but not because it failed, but because of the lessons he learned and wants to share, and he'll do so with a little bit of humor today. So with that, the floor is yours, Dr. Fiedler.
Yeah, thanks, Alex, for the introduction, and also for the invitation to begin with. Didn't think that anybody would want to listen to that story, especially after I titled it that failed startup. But apparently, has a certain morbid fascination with that topic. If you remember right, the Titanic movie was also very successful, so I think there's something that makes it sort of interesting to folks. So yeah, I'm glad that I get that somebody wants to listen to this story, which is, I guess, educational to some extent, and also, of course, sad. I don't know. Alex gets the idea that it's going to be humorous, but okay. What else I want to talk about? Obviously not joining you there in person. I could be anywhere in the world. I happen to be in Belgium these days. It's early evening here in town, and I'm just in the mood for a little presentation. So let's do this. I figured before I get into some of the details on how this venture went and went uphill and downhill eventually, maybe I should show a quick video. This is something that the Innovation Institute makes you record, or when the time comes that this invention disclosure, I suppose, has been filed, and there's a chance that this could become commercially interesting. So we recorded a 2-minute video, and I think this explains everything you have to know about this technology. It isn't really relevant for the rest of the talk, but since we have it, and since it has it's so popular on YouTube, I think it has almost 100 clicks now after 8 years. Let's check this out. And you might also see a little difference in the appearance. And I leave it to you to speculate what that comes from.
Hello, my name is Goeran Fiedler. I'm a professor for prosthetics and orthotics at the University of Pittsburgh. Approximately 2 million Americans are living with limb loss. They use prostheses to be able to live normal lives and to participate in the activities they love. Modern artificial limbs come very close to replacing the natural function and aesthetics of a sound leg. Yet some things have not changed in decades. Prostheses are still being statically aligned using a modular system that was introduced in the 1960s. This conventional method of alignment optimization is tedious and inaccurate. Every artificial leg is optimized for a specific shoe type, and only a specialized clinician is authorized to make alignment changes. Now, every time somebody with such a prosthesis wanted to change shoes, they had basically two options. First, take a couple of hours to see their clinician, or second, put up with a misaligned leg, which is inherently unstable. A problem with the current modular system for prosthesis is that there is no scale or numeric value that corresponds to a certain alignment. And this has disadvantages in regard to documentation, quality control, evidence-based practice, practitioner training, and eventually the quality of care. We have designed a tool to easily quantify such alignment changes in real time. We call it the HD Protractor. This device will help prosthetists achieve more accurate alignments. What's more, for the first time, users of limb prosthesis will be able to properly adjust their limb by themselves. Me and my team would be happy to tell you more about this opportunity, and we thank you for your interest in our technology. Have a nice day.
All right, so that's our 2-minute pitch. And yeah, like the younger me in the video said, I of course happy to tell you all about this if you should really be interested. But by now this is pretty much yesterday's news. Yeah, you of course have noticed there is compare this 8-year younger me with my current appearance. There's an absence of hair there. That is partly due to the failure of this venture. It's probably also due to 2 kids that I have that are 8 and 5 years old now, and I blame pretty much all those misery on them. Well, not everybody aged that poorly. If I can advance the slides here, you will see our intern back in 2014, who helped us develop the first prototype of this, still looks very much the same. And I don't even have to introduce her anymore. So that is a nice coming full circle moment here, where yeah, I remember how we had Alex join us in, it must have been the summer of 2015 in yeah, a summer internship, helping build this prototype that she's showing there, an early version of this technology. And yeah, maybe in order to stay on the timeline here, I just made a few notes on how this all came about. So it started really in the year 2014, my first year at the University of Pittsburgh. And I attended the first year program from the Invention Institute, which I think is something similar as what this, what the audience or most of the audience is doing right now. And as part of this program, of course, you are encouraged to come up with an idea, any idea that could become a product that can be commercialized. And I didn't really have one, but teamed up with a colleague, John Akins, a postdoc at the time here at Pitt in our department, to yeah, essentially make this whole thing up out of thin air and figure out, it gives us something, a mock project, basically to talk about, to go through the motions with all the different assignments, and so that are part of this first year program. And that was quite helpful. And of course, we were able to do this. And in that process, we really continued to develop the idea itself, if not the technology. And it ended in the invention disclosure. The invention disclosure came at some point, and eventually even a patent application that was derived from that one. The patent application is a lengthy process. Unfortunately, the university covers all most of the effort that goes into that, and also the costs, of course. But yeah, that was an interesting experience on itself to see how this all goes, with a lot of iterations back and forth between the patent lawyer and then the reviewer at the patent office, and the inventors, of course, have to make sure that this is still the idea that we were talking about. So anyway, that was certainly one, if you want to talk about takeaway points already, one interesting experience to have. And then the idea, our efforts were pretty much directed at other things. We didn't really pursue the commercialization of that technology beyond the first year program. We did get some funding, of course, with the first year program that was in part paid for Alex's internship in 2015. So we were able to build a prototype. But apart from the occasional invitation, again, from the Innovation Institute to talk to some venture capitalists and that would come visit and meet with certain different inventors of the school, not much was happening. I mean, those meetings were also interesting, certainly, yeah, insightful in what those people are looking for. We learned, for instance, that they would be interested mostly in large addressable markets. So some technology like the next Facebook or so, that would be, I guess, top of their list. And it's pretty obvious this can be something that 1 million or 100 million people will be able to use. So there was a little bit of this mismatch there in the way that ours is really only something that would address the couple 100,000 people with a limb prosthesis that would potentially be interested in that technology. But yeah, nonetheless, that kind of kept us in the conversation there. We did apply somewhat, like, I don't want to say half-heartedly, but it was really tricky to apply to some incubator programs, accelerator programs, like first Alpha Lab Gear, for instance, because they have quite a few expectations on what you would commit to that effort in order to consider you for their accelerator programs. And we weren't really in a position to do that. We were both faculty. John Akins, Dr. Akins, had soon after taken a position at a school near Philadelphia, where he was also very busy pursuing his academic work. So neither of us were really in a position to let's dedicate a lot of time to this effort. So in a way, it was dormant. You could say that there wasn't much happening. However, because it was, I guess, somewhat notorious among the folks at the Innovation Institute and maybe beyond, and there were some, of course, connections that is always helpful. Eventually, it came about that actually Paul Petrovich, who was on the call today, identified a funding opportunities that he thought that reminded him of our project that he had seen earlier, and kind of encouraged us to go and write an SBIR grant that addresses this grant. And so that's what we did then. We ended up, founding a company that's necessary for an SBIR grant. You need to have a business entity. And I think I have another slide that goes into more depth on that. In the context of this company later, and then also getting the SBIR funding, we needed to license the IP from Pitt, who had, of course, the patent rights. And so that was another step in that trajectory there, or in that pipeline of bringing this to market ideally. So there is a pretty well prescribed process of how a standard, I guess, contract that the university offers to manage the intellectual property and license of that. So that came with certain expectations, likewise, not just the fees that the company needed to pay, but also certain deliverables that were attached to that. Another thing in that context, or more or less in that context, was conflict of interest regulations that change quite frequently, I believe. But at the time, it was so that it turns out that I was not allowed to be in any position in this company that we started of fiduciary responsibility in order to avoid any conflicts that come with being also an employee at the university or an inventor of this university IP. So that needed to be navigated, and we managed that in a way that other people took care of the financial questions in the company. So this is one of the slides from our original investor slide deck. I assume most people on the call have made the sort of slide decks, of course, that summarize their technology and idea. So, and along with myself and Dr. Akins, Phil Brooks was one of the original team members. He was an entrepreneur in residence at the Innovation Institute at the time and was really super helpful in just getting us oriented, and can only recommend anybody to work with that entrepreneur in residence program. That was really exactly what was needed, I think, or what's really helped get us to where we got eventually. And so we're still grateful to Phil for the work that he put in, and in a way until the very end put in, even though he stepped away officially from this role as a team member there. So here's more about the incubator that we did end up being part of after all. And that was the Phase 1 Ventures. It's not an incubator, it's an accelerator program at the Science Center in Philadelphia. And they were in the process of starting a collaboration with the University of Pittsburgh. And we just happened to be, I guess, at the right time, at the right place. They identified as one potential pilot venture to kind of exercise this process with. Pitt Innovation again helped us kind of clear the hurdles that were necessary to get into that accelerator program, and maybe they also lowered a few of the barriers for us to make that happen. So we felt a little bit, or we felt quite fortunate to be considered for this, or to be actually accepted into that program. That was still does sound quite attractive. The basic conditions for this accelerator deal are that the Phase 1 Ventures will match funding, external funding that you bring into the venture, say by a grant or our venture capital, up to the first $450,000. And that, in exchange, they would get 10% of the equity. So if you do the math, that would pretty much value the company at 4.5 million, which was certainly a little much, even for our taste. We were worried that we would get ahead of ourselves a little bit, but then again, I mean, that was the setup there. We did get the first SBIR grant eventually. That was $225,000, and the matching funds accordingly. Later on, the plan was to get a phase 2 SBIR or other funding and exploit the full $450K that they would offer. So yeah, the SBIR was chipping in money, and then Franklin and a few other, I guess, smaller institutions, organizations that give out small grants. They were also utilized to be wrote a couple smaller grants. It was fairly easy to do based on the investor slide deck that we already had and the other materials, and got a couple of $1,000 here or there, or some non-financial support. So overall, the work of the Science Center was good, or was helpful to have their connections and their support. It was a little bit logistically complicated or difficult, because obviously they were in Philadelphia. I was not. John Akins sometimes, but again, not a lot of time. So one of the things we did early on was to hire a CEO for the company APO Technologies. I should probably mention that we had funded to be eligible for this SBIR. And so the Science Center helped us with that. They set up a couple of interviews with quite interesting candidates, and we talked to a few of them, and they had really impressive resumes and success in startup management and all sorts of other credentials. And so we settled eventually on an elderly gentleman who was officially retired, but who spent a lot of time in this role helping new startups, by the name of Jack Crowley. And he was great. I mean, he was really very knowledgeable and obviously a lot of experience. And so he took over much of the day-to-day work of the company, also in exchange for some equity. And eventually hired other people there in the program, in the company, to do the work that was, of course, necessary to do it. Let's see what else I have here. So here's just another slide from our deck. You see the years here, so that the more optimistic days when we were mapping out, as you have to, of course, in this investor slide decks, what we were hoping to achieve over the years, how we would grow the company. So some of the things that when talking about the work that needed to be done was to really build or refine the prototype that we had, make this smaller form factor, make this more durable, something that can be manufactured fairly easily, and that has all the utility, all the functionality that we were hoping to achieve. And we also, of course, hope to research that, and that's what we do after all in academics, as academics. Measure the outcomes, assess the outcomes of this technology, and maybe publish that. That was, in a way, our thinking that this would help spread the word, especially with something like that that's really targeted as a very well-defined small community of potential customers. And of course, more marketing efforts, and then eventually get on with the manufacturing and the selling of the thing. So one of the things that's not in this slide here is there are license fees for this business model changed a couple of times back and forth. So there are different opinions on how to best go about this, and a couple of different ideas we are bending around. And I think eventually we settled on an app-based work process there, where the tool itself would be essentially free to the customer. That every time they would use it, they would have to use an app to get the readings out of this. So we would kind of be able to sit in the middle and charge them a fee, either on a case-by-case basis or as a subscription or something along those lines. And that was in the end how we thought this would work. So this app exists, this device also exists. It's pretty much all there. We managed to get to it eventually, but nonetheless, we never sold one item, one unit. So the question is, what happened there? All sounds so great. Couple of different things. So I made a little bit of a list here. It's really hard to put your finger on what exactly. So maybe there's one thing I'm going to talk about in a minute, but overall, it's just a number of factors that play into that, and in a way, also not necessarily things that can easily be avoided, or it is just one of the facts of life, I guess, that like I found 90% or so thereabouts of startups don't really make it in the end. So it is almost the default expectation that something like that will happen. So in our case, some of the things that I can point out were personal changes, for instance. It was really kind of tricky, especially as the team was growing, to get along with everybody, to get the best effort out of everybody, and to not waste time and energy on some disagreements or friction there. And I guess there's a thing as positive friction that helps advance things, but in many respects that didn't quite go our way. So one of the things, for instance, that this CEO that rejected we had was old school in many respects. So one of the things that we disagreed on was where to get the next round of funding for. And most of us people from the university background, we thought, well, we write another grant, we write a phase 2 grant for the SBIR. And that was kind of a foreign concept to him. He wanted to get venture capital from some big sponsors there and exchange equity for this. And so we were kind of uncoordinated. So that second point here on my list was that we didn't really execute the strategy very well. We spent a lot of time, wasted a lot of time on compiling that phase 2 grant, but was still unable to finish it. In the end, we missed the deadline. We couldn't submit it. And so that was all a wasted effort. It was pretty much the end of our pipeline or projected way of financing the company further. So I talked about personal changes. The biggest, most severe personal change, if you want to label it that, was that Dr. John Akins, our co-founder, passed away quite unexpectedly. He was in his 30s. And in early 2016, we just had gotten that phase 1 grant. He passed away, and that was, of course, a big loss for everybody. And not talking about the company in particular, but clearly also for the company, of course, considering that how elemental he was and everything he had done to that point. So that was more or less a point where things really turned bad. We did discuss this at the funeral. I remember that at a lengthy meeting and wondering, should we call it quits or should we keep it up? And in hindsight, made the wrong decision to keep at it and think, well, maybe can kind of advance his legacy here and keep all the good things that we have going running. So that was I guess somewhat misguided in the moment there. So obviously John's missing everywhere didn't make things easier. So we tried to hire our people to replace him, for instance, SDPI on the SBIR and things of that nature. And that also added to the other dynamics that I just talked about. Another point that needs to be noted is, of course, also technical problems. I think that sort of thing can usually be solved. I mean, engineering problems, nothing new, is kind of expected. Not everything works right away. We had the technical expertise to solve those. But what was really more worrisome was that the field tests that we did with our first beta prototypes came back kind of underwhelming results. So most of the folks who tested this out in the field weren't really in love with the thing, and they said it's kind of nice, but I don't know if I would really use it. And so in a way, we kind of found out the hard way that our customer discovery, which of course we had done early on, wasn't necessarily representative, and that we might have really made this old mistake that everybody wants of kind of lying to ourselves and thinking like, if you only ask the right people, we're going to get what we want to hear from them. And so there was that kind of moment when we kind of realized maybe that the thing isn't all that great and nobody really wants it. And then other things are just listed here, the different disputes. There was a little bit of an falling out with the phase 1 venture organization. They also had a lot of personal changes there and a couple of disagreements on how much money we should get or not get, and what we should do for it, and that sort of things of that nature. And the pandemic, at long last, of course, pretty much put an end to all our efforts. Jack Rowley, again, our CEO, was also involved in another startup that happened to make ventilators. And he, of course, suddenly had to dedicate 100% of his time to that effort, as everybody would understand. And he kind of quit there, left our team that was already shrinking with basically 2 people. One of them myself, who again didn't have any fiduciary responsibility, and another one, former engineering VP, who was trying to keep the ship afloat as long as possible, but that was pretty much the death knell at this moment. So also goes as a nice excuse. If something doesn't work and happened to be during the pandemic, it's easy to point the finger and say, well, what do you expect? Force majeure. So yeah, we try to somehow close this out, find anybody to buy this off at a steep discount or at pretty much anything, which didn't really work. It then also took a while to really kind of admit the defeats, or the stages of grief, I guess you could call it. Then we eventually came to the conclusion, okay, let's just call it quits here. We've sunk enough energy into that, and time, of course, into that venture. There's such a thing as, of course, people who start in a startup, like Alex said earlier, they kind of hope to make it rich, strike it rich pretty quickly, but pay for free, basically pay just for equity. But if that takes a while, if that takes really years and years or much longer than expected, and no fruits of their labor are forthcoming, and then there are other opportunities, of course, and so on, then this enthusiasm really runs out. And that was definitely notable. It was really hard to even motivate ourselves to just to we had a weekly standing meeting, and even to go to that or discuss anything there was kind of a chore. So we're definitely not in any shape or form to, I don't know, write another grant or whatever would have been necessary there. Yeah, and basically just have to make sure that the bills are paid, that taxes are still due, and then close out the company. There are checklists on how to do this. It's also pretty somber reading if you want to look this up. And the top company has to be registered, which is difficult, and I think we still didn't do that. So officially, it still exists somewhere as a zombie in the files of the whatever registry in Delaware. And so yeah, that was that story. That took, if you count now, 8 years to come full circle. So some of the things that I think can be taken away from this, and most of this is of course trivial, and everybody would kind of assume that this is what's the case. But you want to really have a very versatile and a dependable team first, and then also versatile, something that covers all the bases of what you need to do there. If there is a lot of miscommunication or just missing connections there between team members, that can really be very problematic. So that assembling the right team from the get-go is really, I believe, very helpful. And then of course it needs time and some dedication, and that's probably something I can blame myself to not have done properly. Like I said early on, it was more or less a homework assignment to do this, come up with this idea, and then one thing led to the other. It wasn't really so that I was pursuing that with my whole heart. I had other things to worry about, and that was more of a side project, and that certainly showed, and I could have spent more time writing grants or things of that nature to help this succeed. So there's something that you should probably wonder yourself, or ask yourself, am I ready to really commit a lot of time, 40 hours a week for the next couple of months into this startup? Otherwise, it might not be a good idea to do it at all. So if you don't want to do it right, I might do it at all. The market research, of course, kind of failed us there, and you could always say, well, we like I said, we kind of lied to ourselves. We looked at it a little bit through tinted glasses, so we shouldn't have done this. But I also think there is a natural limitation to how much you can predict there, and it's the old story, of course. You want to ask the customers what they want, or you want to come up with something that they didn't even know that they need, and so I don't really know what to do about that. But yeah, that problem obviously came out for us, that some of the things we thought our market research had demonstrated weren't really so in reality. Lots of other factors that are random in nature, or that it's kind of hard to put your finger on, factor in there. I think I gave a couple of examples of that too. but yeah, nonetheless, I still think it was helpful. I certainly wouldn't want to miss the experience. I don't know if I would do it again. I guess I would probably, especially if I was 8 years younger again. And then also some of the connections that I personally made in the process that were really helpful. It was really nice to meet those people and to have collaboration, learn from them, still have contacts wherever that becomes interesting or helpful again. And yeah, also my resume became a little longer, just adding the grant, for instance, or the patent. So overall, I already said it. I think I would do it again, but of course not be blue-eyed about what the odds are of succeeding. I believe that's the end of my prepared remarks. Thanks everybody, and I believe there's a Q&A session.
Yeah, absolutely. So you all are welcome to just ask your question or put it in the chat.
I see a hand raised already, Charles.
Yes, hi, Dr. Fiedler. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your experience. My background is I'm an anesthesiologist, and I just completed the first year program this past year. And my question to you is about what qualities were you looking for when you were deciding on the CEO? And could you share a little bit more about looking back? Do you think that, based on your experience, do you think what advice do you have for us for selecting a CEO and sort of turning the reins over to them in terms of executing your vision?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that's a good question. And I just tried to remember how that went. And in a way, we were, John and I, going into those interview meetings that the Science Center had set up with kind of the similar questions. But like, I don't know what we should ask this person. I think we dug deep and found some sort of just conversational questions to try and learn a little bit more about. So our thinking was, well, if we get along with the guy, and if he has, I mean, we could see the resumes beforehand that they had all experience, put in an experience in the startup field. And this Jack was also in medical field and somewhat medical device industry. Somewhat that would be helpful, and the rest of it would be just if we feel like we connect, and there would be a good chemistry, or whatever we want to call this. So I don't know if that was the right approach. We did talk to, I think, 3 people, and 2 of them struck us. I want to sound mean now, but they were a little bit very confident of themselves and what they all could do for us, and so it sounded more like salespeople and wasn't exactly what we thought like we would like to work with. And so Jack was more like grandfatherly, very personable, and just made us feel comfortable right away to talk. And so that the soft factor kind of tipped the scales in his favor. What kind of didn't work so well was really, like I said, his kind of old school thinking. He didn't get along too well with some of the folks who had quick ideas and maybe like unrealistic ideas, and were maybe getting a little bit ahead of themselves, and he wanted to kind of do things more by the book. And I don't know if there's really a book, but I remember there was a little bit of friction there with for instance, the person we hired to replace John as the PI, and then the 2 of them never really saw eye to eye, and there was some unfortunate disconnect. And then really what I personally didn't like was then the reluctance to pursue the phase 2 application. So I didn't mention this, but I just remember that we also, one of the lessons to learn was to invest the money into a professional grant writer at this stage. So we had plenty of money to go around. I guess plenty, but like I said, 225,000. We could have taken 10,000 of that and hire somebody who knows how to write an SBR phase 2 grant, which we eventually did, but way too late. The guy had no chance to catch up and get this ready. And part of why we didn't do this was like this mentioned reluctance. So I don't know if this really answers your question. I think there needs to be a good alignment between the nature of your venture and their background or their way of thinking to really make them an effective CEO. So as much as possible, if that can be kind of figured out and in the hiring process, that would be my recommendation to go for that. And unfortunately, not an expert, so not for other people to talk more about that.
Thank you.
All right, so another question that was in the chat, Goeran, how much revenue did you generate in the market, or was this all in the pre-sales stage?
Yeah, I know that number exactly, 0. So yeah, we didn't sell one thing. I have on my desk, I think 2 prototypes that are pretty much ready to be sold. And we were thinking at some point to make a stronger case for, like when I talked about the fire sale, so wouldn't it be nice to have a website where you can buy this and actually somebody bought this already, and we can say we sold at least even one. And we decided against it because there's also so much that needs to be done in terms of servicing and warranty and kind of technical support, that we were really just scared to commit ourselves to that. And we didn't really want to get on the bad side of any of those nice people who had like beta tested for us or so. So we kind of realized this is a bigger step. You don't do this if you are down to 2 people and you're kind of ready to sell the whole thing. And it might have been somebody, a little less more scrupulous, would have probably said, let's just take it until you make it. Let's sell one even with a huge discount, and then maybe that would be a nice selling point for the poor person who considers taking over this venture. But yeah, no, we didn't sell any. I see Dave has a question.
Yeah, Goeran, thanks for sharing this. So it seems like APO Technology put all their eggs in this one basket for this one product. And I wonder, in retrospect, do you think that you should have started developing other products along, working on the same problem? Or do you think just focusing on that one product was the right strategy?
Yeah, no, that definitely came up. And that's also one of the typical questions that those venture capitalists would always ask: what is the next product, or what would be another application for this technology? It's certainly important to think about. And we did think about this a lot. So in fact, the second stage or second generation of our technology would have had quite some different functionality. So that was the subject of our phase 2 application, which again was 95% done, but not submitted. And so when the first generation product was really for the technician to clamp on that prosthetic leg and measure the angles, the second generation was supposed to be integrated in that pylon. So not a separate device, but so there was a certain vision there that every prosthetic pylon would have this integrated technology that then would make it a smart pylon, and people would be able to, using their phone, figure out the angle, the alignment angles right away. So that was in a way a different product, or would have been a different product based on more or less still the same basic technology, but covering quite a different area with a different business model and all this. So yeah, we were trying to do that for sure.
So another question in the chat from Carl: what was your exit strategy at the beginning?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we didn't really have a strategy officially. So I think when Jack came on, he had a pretty clear idea that this would have to get to a certain level and then be sold. He had an idea of who would buy it, and so there was this thinking of proving the business. How do we call this? Making it, like selling a few of those things and showing that they kind of do what we said they would do, that there's money in this, and then ship this around and see if somebody wants to take it up. I don't think any of us were kind of seeing us as doing this forever. That was always going to be limited to some extent. And yeah, clearly, I mean, since everybody was working for free and then for equity, there was thinking of this being taken over. It was way too small to think of like an IPO or something like that. That would have never been the size of it. So yeah, like I said, we had a couple of potential bigger companies who might have been interested in taking this on, and ideally would have bought us out there.
Gotcha. And another question there in the chat was just, Matt had asked, why couldn't you go to the venture capital marketplace once the grant option ended? So you had mentioned both of those strategies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but so I guess we did. Jack did try to do that. So that was his way of thinking about this from the get-go. He didn't really see the value in getting another $1 million or so from the SBR in the phase 2. He figured like this. I mean, he liked the idea that it's non-diluted funding, but he still thought it would be much more straightforward to get that $1 million from a venture capitalist. I don't think he might have, tried his connections there, but I think he came up empty. And in my understanding, it probably has to do with really this just very small addressable markets. Even in the most favorable assumptions, there are. You can look it up. There are maybe 600,000 people or so in America who have a prosthetic leg where this technology would be useful. But even that doesn't need to be aligned all the time. So they would only see their prosthetists, everything goes well enough once or twice a year. And that the question is now, if you can charge them $5 each time, how much is this really going to be in total? So I think most venture capitalists have better options than something with that kind of low ceiling to invest their money in. So that might be the explanation there.
Another question I actually had for you, Goeran, that I was hoping you could share was something I know we had talked about in the past, was your role within the university versus your role within the company. So what your limitations were in terms of helping with testing and helping to validate the device, and kind of how I know that was a struggle in terms of being able to really be hands-on because of, kind of your, quote unquote conflict of interest, right? Because it was your device and the company. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, there are certain conflict of interest rules to be observed. And I think Dave is more in a better position to talk about how this looks from the side of the university at this point. I know it changed at some point. They tried to make it easier or less of a problem with the conflicts there. There's a rule that the NIH, NSF was where we got our SBRR, has in place. So for the SBR, the Small Business Innovation Grant, there was 30%, 35% allocated for testing that went as a subcontract to the university. So the APO Technology got the grant, and university got a subcontract to do testing. That I couldn't be involved in that testing, so that went to a colleague. I think it even went to Dave. And so that was the setup there, so that I was staying out of this. And it kind of makes sense because, clearly I had a financial interest in the results of this testing being positive. And so I don't really think that was a problem. But yeah, you definitely needed to know those rules and be careful to not violate them. As far as the rule that prohibited me from being financially responsible, I actually like that rule. I didn't really want to be anywhere involved with any, billing or whatever goes on there, paying taxes. And so I'm glad that somebody else take care of that, especially when it all kind of went to shambles there. So I didn't really have a problem with that. It was kind of a welcome excuse for me to say, well, I would love to help you with that, but unfortunately cannot touch anything that relating to money. So that's I guess what I took from that.
All right, thank you very much. There is one more question in the chat that I saw, and it was from Carl, just asking how you found a manufacturer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was one of the really positive experiences of working with subcontractors. So we didn't have any manufacturing capabilities, so it was all outsourced. And then it's not just about manufacturing, but also really making it ready for, there's a word for that, engineering it to that point where it can actually be manufactured. There's one thing to have something on a computer screen, and then now I want to actually make it. So we found a couple of companies that we had, interviewed and talked to and worked with to some extent that would help with both of those. They would take our designs and say, okay, we need to improve it, this and that, or even optimize certain designs there, certain wiring and other things, and then also would be able to manufacture at least a small series of those devices. And I can recommend, I have to look it up now where exactly that was, but I can recommend a few places in Philadelphia. But there are companies that are specialized in that sort of services, engineering and small series manufacturing. It's very helpful to have recommendations there and connections.